Hey guys, what's up? I'm doing a live paint. I just did the reference photo in my stories, so if you'd like to follow along or paint along, you can go look at that. It's a picture of a pomegranate. I just cut one open this morning, and so I cut it in half, and yeah, I got a good little reference photo, so I thought I'd walk you guys through that. Seems like a very seasonal thing to paint, so yeah, just stay tuned. I primed with a different color this time. I've been loving this color for like my larger work. So yeah, this is just paper, canvas paper, and I think it's like pre-gessoed. And then I'm using acrylics, golden and Liquitex mostly. Okay. I'm just drawing this in with my phthalo. You can choose any color you want. I will likely cover up most of this underpainting. At least that's the goal. Just sort of marking in the boundaries. One thing I always tell my kids in art school is that drawing for painting is completely different than drawing to draw, and basically you're just creating a map for yourself later more than you are like creating a finished product. And sometimes I fill in my values a little bit, and sometimes I don't. It really just kind of depends on the day. And then I remember last time I got some comments about people saying that the text was covering the painting. I think if you just tap it, the comments will kind of go lower, and so you can see more of the composition. At least that's how I understand it. Maybe it's different for different phones, but anyways. And so the seeds don't really have to be rendered. The reason I picked this composition is because it's so forgiving. People a lot of times struggle with pomegranates because they get really caught up in the details, but I feel like it's a pretty forgiving thing to paint. So that's my underpainting, or my drawing, however you want to call it. And basically it's, you can kind of tell what it is, but it's just enough information that I can sort of tell what I'm doing later without getting lost in the detail. So I think now I'm going to jump in with my darkest value. So if I look here, the shadow isn't actually the darkest. That's one thing when I teach new painters is they sort of instantly assume that the shadow is the darkest, and that's not always right. At least it isn't in this case. The darkest is going to be like right here and maybe a little bit up here. And so I'm going to go in and mix that color and just work my way up the value scale from there. And I'm able to use that blue to sort of muddy down the dark red that I'm going to use. So I have alizarin crimson, some Jenkins green, a little bit of that blue, and a little more alizarin crimson. Okay. And then I think I am going to jump to the shadow next. So I'm taking some, let's see, ultramarine blue, a little bit of white, and then some of that alizarin crimson combo. And then I think I just need the value up a little bit. And then the closer to the edge of my shadow, the more of that ultramarine I'm going to add in. Because if you look at my reference photo, it's hard to tell, but the shadow is warmer where the reflected light of the pomegranate is reflecting into the shadow. So, you know, don't just assume, oh, it's roughly this, you know, dark violet-y color. If you actually look for a little bit of the detail in there, you'll find usually like 1 or 2 different values and colors. And I feel like the more attention you pay to your shadow, the more interesting it is. It seems less like an afterthought. And I feel like it makes your composition read a little bit more like thought out. And I don't know, it's fun to look at the details too. And in fact, I'm going to take some of this cadmium red and just add a tiny bit right around the edge. And if you want to get really, really focused, you can even see that there's a bit around the edge of the pomegranate seed. But you definitely don't have to do that. I just already have it mixed up, so. Okay, and then let's see, I think I'm going to try to paint in some of this flesh and then just go from there. So I need to bring the value up a little bit, and since it's still in shadow, even though it's much pinker than everything I've painted so far, I'm going to just mix it right next to what I've been mixing so that some of those blues can pull into it. But I'm mostly using cadmium and quinacridone magenta to make that flesh color. And I'm bumping it back in saturation just a tiny bit with a little bit of chromium oxide green, which might seem like random, but it's actually a wonderful way to sort of pull down the saturation of that pinky red without, you know, pulling it really cool. Okay. Let's see. Just need to bring up the value. Then now I'm going to go in and do kind of where the edge of the outside of the fruit meets the inside. It's a little bit more saturated and a little bit darker in value. So more alizarin. If you're going to paint a pomegranate, yeah, you definitely might want some alizarin. It's a really helpful color, as it turns out. So and now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to approach this flesh up here. As you can tell, it's, you know, it's white. Its local color is kind of a white, titanium, I would say titanium white and some ochre. That by pulling it a little bit kind of adds a little bit of contrast to the flesh of the, or the rest of the pomegranate, the seeds. So yeah. One thing I stay clear of is just painting things white, even if they are like, you know, if someone were to come up to you and say, hey, what color is this? You know, I would say, oh, it's white. But when you're mixing it for a painting, you almost have to interpret it completely differently. You have to sort of think how it's going to play with everything around it. You know, I always tell my students that a painting is kind of its own little world. And so you kind of have control over how you know, how you choose to paint things. So it's not bright enough, but I'm going to build up the brightness slowly. I don't know if you guys have ever painted with white and then completely blown out your colors. It's hard to go back when you've used a really bright white right out of the gate. So I'm approaching it cautiously. And the places where the white is kind of in shadow, or not in shadow. Well, it's in shadow, but it's also like the light isn't catching it. Sort of have to decide if you want it to pull cool, but I want it to stand out from the actual seed. So I'm going to pull a little bit more green into it, a little more red, and then maybe even just a bit of blue. Okay. Wow, this is kind of, I love this already just at this stage. But now I'm going to go in with my background color, just so then I can make better decisions about how bright I want the lit parts of the seeds to be. Sometimes I save this for the like absolute last, but sometimes if I'm having a hard time figuring out the highlights or the places that the light is hitting something, I'll go ahead and do the background a little bit earlier. And so again, I'm always careful not to use a stark white or just pure titanium. And so I'm mixing some of my other colors in with it, and then some yellow ochre and even some red to create more of a creamy beigey color. I always love this part because it's like you're just kind of carving out. I feel like you do more drawing with like the negative space than you do with your actual lines or painting in the objects. And since you're not having to juggle, what color you're painting or the value, you're just putting in the white. I don't know, it feels really zen. And the nice thing about liking your background color is you don't quite feel the need to, hurry up and cover every single spot. I don't intentionally let it shine through. Like it's a conscious thing. I just sort of do my best at drawing in the shape. And wherever the green is left over, it's like, to quote good old Bob Ross, it's like a happy accident. So. So now that I have the background in place, I have a lot more information as far as like how I want to build up these values. And let's see. So starting with some reds, cadmium, alizarin crimson, a little bit of quinacridone magenta, and then let's see, I'm going to add in some blue and see what this looks like. So I've done an impromptu demo for my Not Sorry Art School kids, and some of them were specifically asking, how do you paint the seeds? And the best advice that I had for them was you don't actually paint the individual seeds for the most part. You start with your average darkest value, and then you slowly build up the form. And that way you're not painting like the edges of the seeds with a dark color to sort of create definition. You're almost working like in an opposite way. And when you do that, you can focus more on what's actually in front of you instead of painting what you know. And it creates a more painterly and realistic looking pomegranate seed. So a bunch of them had a lot of luck with that. The thing with highlights is they're never usually just one dot. They're always a little bit more complicated than that. Yeah, okay, so that feels done. Yeah, now I'll peel the tape. It's always like the most satisfying part. But yeah, you can see it was a bunch of like small decisions and value, building up the value that really created the look. And it, you know, of course the highlights always help, especially with pomegranates. I think that's why so many people paint them, because it's really satisfying as a painter to like go in and, you know, these blobby red things sort of pop after you do that. But yeah, here, I'll give you guys a close-up. Let's see. This way. Yeah, it turned out pretty good. It was fun. And you can see how like having the underpainting really informs the composition in a way. Like it kind of, I don't know, it's like sewing in a little bit of your personality without having to like do something wild or super abstract if you want to stay, you know, realistic, or painting in kind of a realistic style. But these are the colors. People always ask to see the paper. But yeah, it's just a lot of those. As you guys can see, I sort of start here and I sort of mix onto it. It almost makes like a train, like a color train. And this is the palette. It's the same one I did, same paints I had last time. So goes to show how great the Stay Wet palette is. So I'm going to flip around and look at some of your guys' questions. So let me put my lid on. Hey, let's see. I always try to get this set up straight. Hold on. You guys are balancing on like old boxes and stuff. Okay. So hopefully you don't fall back midway through. But yeah, anyways, it was pretty fun. This is the finished product. I'll post it, I think, later today or maybe tomorrow or something. But yeah, that was really fun. So let me look back and see. Just again, I was painting with acrylics, Golden and Liquitex heavy body acrylic paints. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the palette works together. I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about forcing yourself to sort of mix with the old paintbrush, is you can use that. So let's say it's even like the opposite color, like you're painting something green and now you need to do something red. You can start with the lowest level of intensity because you already have the opposite or the complement color mixed onto your brush. It saves money and time and energy and all that, but it also, because you're pulling the saturation back with that particular pigment, it's going to reinforce the more saturated versions of that over and over. So it's cool because it kind of informs itself, and then again, it's like the easiest thing. So let's see. Oh, you guys are sweet. I've done a pomegranate several times, so I'm able to crank through it pretty quick. But the first time I do something that's complicated, like pomegranate, or the first time I did dragon fruit, I remember it took a long time because it was a lot of studying and sort of having to make these decisions of how I'm going to approach it. And of course, you know, the first time you paint it, you try to paint the seeds individually, and then that doesn't turn out well, and so you have to paint over it. So the reason that came together fairly quickly was a little bit of luck, and then also I've painted them like several times. So yeah, how many brushes did I use? Okay, I used 4 brushes. Oh, they're goopy, but I'll kind of show you. So these were the brushes. The largest is the size 10, I believe. All flats and brights. Yeah, and then let's see, a size 2 and 2 size 1s. You know, the details at the end, because you've built up to the highest level of saturation and value, typically I'll switch through a bunch at the end, but I'll work through the first 75% of a painting like this with one brush. Again, a little bit because I'm lazy, but a little bit because I'm trying to use those older colors to inform the rest of the composition. So yeah, I love explaining the color theory, and you know, for every different artist, they're going to be, you know, clinging on to like different aspects of color theory. So this is kind of my the way I interpret it and sort of play the game. But yeah, I always enjoy hearing how other artists sort of interpret. And some people use like a really formal approach where it's like it's almost mathematical, which is impressive in and of itself. But yeah, mine is a little more like I'm playing warming, cooling, high to low saturation, and then I'm sort of just responding to the composition. So yeah, let's see. Talk about brands. Yeah, I just like the heavy body acrylic paints. In college, that was what we were assigned to paint with. And yeah, I just really like the texture of them. I like that they can hold up to adding a little bit of water. I don't add a ton of water, but I mist my palette to keep it wet. And then I also mist sometimes the way I'm mixing. And then I will dab just a tiny bit of water on my brush before I mix. And I find that some of the other paints don't hold up to that as well. I'm trying right now to find some less expensive paints that hold up a little bit. You know, I haven't played the market and like figured out which paint brands are like the best, just because I've been so spoiled by Golden and Liquitex. It's almost like painting with a different medium compared to like the student grade stuff, which is why when people are like, oh, I've tried acrylic and I don't like it, I always like, my first question is like, have you tried the nicer paints? But yeah, I just think that the texture is great, the opacity is wonderful, but I'm currently searching for other different paints that I can recommend. I know house paints, a lot of people paint with those and they can be pretty inexpensive, but I think they're pretty liquidy and it's not my thing. But yeah, just, you know, I really like them. Let's see, and I do have a YouTube channel where I've gone over a lot of this information. The reason I have a YouTube channel in addition to like a formal, you know, paid Not Sorry Art School is because I feel like people should be able to try out a teacher kind of and see if you like my style, and you know, that way you're not like swindled into something you don't know about. So I have a bunch of videos on YouTube that I talk about this stuff. I walk through color theory to some degree for free. I mean, it's for free, but it's not like as thought out as Not Sorry Art School, where I like sit down with a color wheel and I talk through everything and it's all the way from the ground up. But if you're interested in kind of what it would be like, then yeah, you can head over to my YouTube and look at some of those videos. Do I use medium? Just a little bit of water. If I'm painting larger, like this guy, when I'm drawing, I will add in some Liquitex or Golden Flow Improver, and that way, just when you're mixing, sometimes it starts to dry out, it can get really thick, and the line that you're drawing with can just get really like gloopy and dry brushy, and that way I use that medium to kind of keep the consistency inky just for the drawing, and usually just when I'm painting large. But otherwise, a little bit of water is the only medium I use. The reason it looks so blendy is because I work really fast. I started painting like daily on practice on my own outside of college with a little baby. I just had a baby, and so I had nap time, and so I that's how I learned to be really fast, was because I had like 20 minutes to get stuff done. So yeah, that's why I'm very quick. Let's see. Yeah, cool. So many questions. Hi guys, recognize so many of you. I'm painting from a photograph. I had it in my I guess it's still there in my stories. If I do a live paint, I'll always throw the reference photo at you guys. And feel free to use those to paint your own pomegranates. I know it's hard to get you know, your own still life setup and stuff. So, but yeah, I do think painting from life has value though. You know, people ask this a lot, and I think there's a little bit of like, how do I put it? Like, I don't know. There seems to be a little bit of hierarchy between painting from life and painting from photo, and certainly painting from life is a wonderful thing to do when you're learning, especially because you're interpreting something that's real, and a lot of times you have more information because you're not only is it not cropped, but you're not limited by pixels. So in the beginning, when I pointed out that this area was really dark, when I took the photo like an hour ago, I noticed that it wasn't nearly as dark in real life as it was in the photo. So if you're not familiar with painting from life, that's going to limit you. However, that being said, not everyone has the luxury of setting up a still life and then painting from it. Not everyone has the space, time, energy, whatever. A lot of people are hobby painters, and so I don't create a hierarchy between the two. I think there's value to painting from life. If you can do it, I think it's great. But yeah, painting from a photo, if that's all you have, like, just do that. So, yeah. Any tips for painting from life? Yeah, so, you know, I guess like my biggest tip is, you know, get whatever you're painting from life, make sure that you've anchored yourself. So either use a piece of tape, like in college we would stand by an easel and we would take like this kind of tape and put it to whatever our dominant leg was that we kept our weight on. We would tape the back of our foot so that it was marked, kind of like you do when you set up like tripods and stuff. Anchor it, because when you're painting from life, the hard thing, especially if you're trying for real accuracy, is keeping like not having it shift, because especially when you're learning to draw, having those slight variations can create a really wonky looking still life or composition. And so if you've anchored yourself, you've already alleviated a lot of that struggle of like it moving around. Just, you know, keep yourself anchored in one spot. That's like my first tip. And then second of all, be really conscious that you're having, especially if you're used to painting from photo, you have so much more information when you're painting from life. Maybe even making a tool where you can crop what you're looking at, a viewfinder. That way you're weeding out information. And then also, if you're painting from life, one thing that I find really helpful is doing little studies. So even just in black and white, or just even a drawing, sort of go ahead and whatever you've chosen for your composition, go in and draw it really quick or paint it in really quick and see if you like the way it is. Because sometimes when you're looking at it from life and you're like, oh yeah, this is a good cropping, you start painting and then all of a sudden you've decided, oh, I included way too much information or not enough information. I find when you're painting from a photo, because you've already done so much of the cropping, like that whole step is taken out of the equation. When you're painting from life, how you're choosing to crop and what you're including in your composition is almost its own beast in its own right. So a little study might help alleviate. I mean, you don't want to get halfway through a big painting that you spent days on and then be like, oh, you know what? I actually should have picked a better composition. So I've done that a million times. Can you tell I'm speaking from experience there? The paint goes on smooth. I think it's because I wet my brush before I dip in. I think it's because I have the nicer paints. I think you can cheap out on everything, but the paints are really important, and because I work fast, so it looks more like oil in that case. Let's see. When you paint in your video, I always have such great control of the amount of paint on my brush. Any tips for controlling the paint volume during working? Yeah, so this is kind of like one of the first things this part's important. So when I'm mixing, let's see, here, I'll show you on here. So let's say you grabbed your color, 'cause some people use palette brushes and I don't. There's no reason for that other than I think it's just like quicker to do it this way. But if you don't use a palette brush, what I do is I'll get my colors, I'll mix, and then so you want to mix your color completely. Then I smush my brush, what would this be, horizontally, all the paint out this side, all the paint out this side, and then go through and sort of, here, look, there you go, that, take this and then bring up the paint, and you'll get kind of a bead of paint at the end. This brush is so fluffy, but if you have a brush that's not as fluffy, it'll work better. And it usually creates a nice little rim of paint right on the edge, and depending on the size of brush, that'll last you a while. And that's another reason I always recommend using larger brushes, because if you have a larger space this way, not this way, but this way, you can store up a ton more paint. So even on something this small, I'll use a really big like wide brush, like this isn't one, but think of double the size. And if you blend a color that's really nice and you like it, I could cover the majority of this negative space with just that one brush, because I'm able to keep my brush really sharp, flatten it out like this, and then bead back up the paint I mixed, and then I can cover a lot. So that's the technique I use. And then also pivoting slightly, that's the reason why painting with a large brush can be really helpful, because you're then able to cover large spaces pretty quick. So I hope that was helpful. Good questions. You guys are awesome. Let's see. Yeah, good morning. Let's see. Hard to find the time to paint with little kids. Yes, it really is. Just because of the nature of, if you guys don't know, I have 2 kids. I have a almost 4-month-old and a 5-year-old. Just because of the nature of being a mom and how much of a full-time job that can be, my thing is, like, I do a little bit daily. Like, it isn't realistic for me to have, like, a full day of painting, because I make breakfast, I make lunch, I make dinner most days, I have bedtime routine. Like, there's just so much of my day is, and I love it, but it's spent keeping little humans alive. And so for me, my success has been, being okay even if it's just like an hour or 20 minutes or something in the studio, and just doing it every single day. I know it's different for everyone. I have a mom friend in town who has 4 kids, and her thing is once every couple of weeks she'll have a full Saturday where she'll get stuff done. But she also has family that can watch her kids for that day. So, but she has 4 kids, so maybe she doesn't have daily time. So it's just about figuring out when and where you have the pockets of time. And also cut yourself a break. If you only have 20 minutes a day to paint, you're not going to make a masterpiece, but that's okay. The fact is, like, you've gotten in the time, and especially with a family, it's so easy to give and give and give. You have to really, once you've made it like a daily thing, like, oh, it's morning, mom's going to go paint for an hour. It's easier to fight for that time because it's already built into the routine. Like, I'm painting now, and I made breakfast. I did some homeschooling with Knox, and now my husband, who works from home right now, is watching the kids, the baby's sleeping, and this is my time to work. So it's tough. It's not easy. And, I definitely let a lot of things go. Like, my house isn't always, super clean, and there's a lot of things that I've just had to be like, well, this is, if you're trying to balance painting and momming, some things just have, are always going to be a mess. And I'm okay with that. They'll grow up. They won't always need their, everything done for them. And I'd rather be messy and painting than not painting and being like a better, perfect mom or whatever. So yeah, I think a lot of that's just like self-love and self-compassion. The overalls, yes, I know I'm such a trope with these, like a painter in overalls, but I love them so much. Let's see, I'll get to, I think, one more question. Have you used the Zorn palette? Yeah, so I actually just got done talking to my kids about limited palette. So if anyone's wondering what's the Zorn palette, it's let's see, it's ivory black, I think, because it's a cool tone black, white, yellow ochre, and then is it cadmium red or a red? I think it's cadmium. But it's a limited palette that you use, and the purpose of it, so Felicia Forte, I took a workshop with her, and she was recommending it because she had a really exaggerated use of color, and then she specifically did a series of painting. I think she may have painted like for a year with just the Zorn palette to sort of refine, I think that's the best word for it, her palette, and it definitely does that, because if you notice, there's no blue in that, and the reason you can, or the way you can create blue with the Zorn palette is by context. So if you have a shape, let's say like it's an eye, it's a little painting of an eye. If you build up a lot of red and yellows, so it creates like an orangey flesh tone, and really exaggerate the orange undertone in the flesh. When you take that cool tone black, which it's a black, but it's slightly cool, it's actually going to read as blue because of the contrast. So basically, it helps you to refine the way you mix paint by limiting yourself. And I've played around with the Zorn palette. It is extremely hard, especially for someone like me who, like, I really love bright colors. But yeah, if you're struggling with, if you're the kind of painter that you have so many tubes of paint, so many different colors, you're overwhelmed with your palette, like you're always halfway mixing and you're thinking, oh, I have a teal I can use, instead of forcing yourself to mix it, a Zorn palette would be really good for you to really develop that sense of color and really strengthen that muscle of being able to mix within your limited composition. So if that makes sense. But yeah, I should do a couple of Zorn demos. You guys will see me
fail and flail, but that's fun too. So, okay, cool. I think I'm gonna hop off, but I hope that was helpful. All of this is, of course, to promote Not Sorry Art School this week. Through Monday, through Cyber Monday, it's 20% off. The great thing about Not Sorry Art School is not only does it have like the 101 painting information, so it's like 5 hours of like the basics of painting, but I add demos to it. I just added a Halloween demo. I'm working on a greenhouse series demo where I'm going to show you guys how to paint with greens specifically. And once you pay in one time, all the information you'll have a lifetime membership, and it'll just keep adding to your doc. So, buy in when it's low, because as I add more courses, the price is going to reflect the value. So it's going to go up. So, but yeah, thanks for being here. If you're interested in that, it's in my link tree. Of course, I'll put it in my stories, but, yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Happy Thanksgiving, happy whatever you're celebrating. Yeah, thank you.